manifesto and says that the NDP will be at the heart of the manifesto, when one of the other agreements at the summit is that there will be an inclusive process of arriving at what the manifesto will say. So there is a locking in of various elements of government and the ANC, and that ties in. I mean, the other thing, what was expressed by a number of people within the ANC at the Alliance Summit was an anti-welfare position, slamming the social grants, for example, and slamming increased expenditure on social welfare. And you can see there's a drift that's moving more and more towards a consolidated market position that is flowing through all of the government departments. And when you engage with any government department, whether it's the Department of Transport on e-tolls, for example, the ideology comes through absolutely undiluted. The same with when you say we must engage on EPWP and so on, we do through NEDLAC. It comes on the agenda once a quarter in the development chamber at NEDLAC. But the answers that come back to us are really, there is no openness to reflect on where that program is going. I mean, we're aware there is a review going on at the moment, and maybe there's some space there. But, I suppose our sense is that there's an increasing consolidation of a view. And if the NDP is going to play the kind of role that you're suggesting it could, it's only the commissioners that can publicly, collectively present or put a different stamp on that role. Because at the moment, my view is it's been completely appropriated by those that adhere to a more right-wing economic thinking within government, and a repressive thinking for that matter.
Now, Jane's issued a challenge to the National Planning Commissioners, and because we've got another one present, I think I should give Mike Muller, the controversial, flamboyant Mike Muller, a chance to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. That's retaliation for previous events. Let me just say, by prefacing a response, one of the areas which we're quite weak on as a society when we respond is locating South Africa in the world. And I think one of the things that the plan perhaps does reasonably well in parts, and then terribly in others, is say, look, we're 50 million people in a world of 8 billion. We need to find our way in this space, and we're not independent agents. We need to understand how we work. And my first engagement in national development planning was with your compatriots of the German Democratic Republic this is from a representative of the German embassy, I have to make the point. We worked with the planners of the German Democratic Republic in Mozambique. And Mozambique wasn't doing badly as a revolution in southern Africa in the 1970s. But as the socialist bloc declined, Mozambique's alternatives were completely constrained. And I think if we don't understand the constraints imposed from outside, we don't make any progress at all. So the problem with employment globally is that we've got more than enough means of production to meet all the needs of the people of the world today. No problem. Just one small problem, we don't know how to distribute those products. So we're not facing alone a problem of how do we engage people in decent work. This is a problem that's happening across the world. And then what we perhaps need to ask is if the people on the right, and I think there is contestation, very clear contestation, if people on the right are appropriating parts of the plan which seem to be convenient, the question is, are people on the left appropriating the many entry points that I believe we have created in the plan? And let's have the engagement. The plan, at the very least, should be a site of contestation, a site of debate, a site of engagement in the society. And I think it's beginning to be that. But if one side dismisses it and the other side appropriates it, it's very easy then for elements in government to say, well, we've been told to do the following. And they will do them. And in the infrastructure side, I'm very pleased they're doing them because a lot of what they're doing is necessary. But I think we're missing the positive seeds, which are about guarantees of welfare, which actually is in the plan, guarantees of employment if the economy fails, which is in the plan, guarantees of a certain minimum quality of life, which is in the plan. And we should be saying, how do we build these and how do we take them further? Commissioners are there as individuals. We have these contests in the Commission. We have some really interesting fights. But I don't think we are going to be able to come with a collective voice and say, this is how this should be taken forward. I was very pleased to see Commissioner Gotzel saying, for instance, if he was in business at the moment, he wouldn't allow wages to be deducted for micro-lenders to get paid back. Wonderful. But that's his view from his perspective as a former businessman. And I think the value of the commissioners is our diversity. But what we depend on to use that diversity is that other voices should join in the debate. And at the moment, I'm afraid we've got one group, business, very strongly adopting, and we haven't got the other group looking for what's there and taking it and moving with it. Rather, there's been a rejection without anything, an alternative being placed. And I think that is worrying because it's weakening the use that could be made of the instrument, and it's actually weakening some of the very progressive elements that are in it. And I think that's what we need to rethink. And decent life rather than decent work is actually a very useful slogan around which we can pick up some of the positive elements in the plan. So as an individual commissioner, we don't have a collective voice. That's just another perspective.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. Yes, at the back. Yeah.
Karl, this is a bit of sensitive question. I'd like to outline one other area where I think is inherent within the Commission itself. And this is mostly based on the requirement for skilled resources to drive these plans that we have already presented already. There's a cry from the business and also from Costa, if I'm not mistaken, that as much as the government would love to engage the community, the business, and labor on the other hand, what do we do, or how long are we going to live with situations of cadet deployment? That's one. Two, related to that, is political connectivity. Because the fact that I'm black, it doesn't just automatically mean I'm politically connected and just get away from it. So to address the skill problem, how long are we going to deal with that kind of scenario? Because obviously, for whatever is envisaged in the plan that we have just presented, obviously we need skilled people to drive that ahead.
Thanks, Comrade. Tony?
Yeah. There's really not room to stand up in this room anymore. Tony Davis, when you were listening to what Karl has said just recently about the need to radicalize some received wisdom, look at what is happening in Europe. Look at Spain with its huge inequality. Look at Britain mashing up its social services to the point at which universities become the preserve of the children of the rich. Right? Look at France. Look at youth unemployment throughout Europe. Right? We have problems, sure, but we have some solutions if we were to listen carefully, right, to what is going on there and what is being said here.
Okay, very briefly, I mean, I think that, Mike engaged with, quite strongly with Jane's question. I mean, I did want to, I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, the appropriation of the plan and the kind of drift towards silly, but the plan, if you take this document as a plan, it's impossible for a government to not be selective in how it approaches that document. There's just far too much of all these different levels of detail, small things, big things, and so on. You cannot implement it all. So that selection is going to take place. And the question is, what kind of selection is it, and how does that happen? And I think you're absolutely right that there's a very strong kind of appropriation of all of these elements into a kind of a market vision, a market ideology, and a set of market solutions. I think there's quite strong counter elements that you can in turn appropriate from the plan, as Mike said. You know, the first argument that has to be won is that it's not a blueprint. It's ludicrous to see it as a blueprint. So that engagement and argument has to continue. And I think that's, I mean, you know, part of what you've raised, Jane, is questions to do with the state of the alliance and the question of the power or lack of power of COSATU within the alliance. And that's a question, I mean, unfortunately the Commission can't pronounce on that issue, but it's a case of ongoing struggle, I suppose. In relation to the question about skilled, I mean, again, you really are right, and the plan, you know, identifies the question of skill and identifies a series of problems with the way the state currently is organised. And I think that we make some quite strong proposals there. I think that it should go further, but the plan talks very strongly about trying to insulate, about setting up certain steps to insulate the administration, or I suppose rather to manage the interface between the political and the administration, and that's the interface at which a lot of the problems happen. So, for example, right at the beginning of the transition, the regulations and the laws were written that enabled the political head, the minister or the MEC, to oversee the appointment of anyone within their departments. And it was obviously necessary in the move from apartheid to democracy, that if you were going to transform the functioning of state institutions, this was a political process. And so the involvement of the political head was quite critical. That has now reached the stage where, you know, continuing political interference in the appointment of anyone from top to bottom of the department is really destructive. Every new political head that comes in, the outcome of every factional battle means that you have this shake-up within the department, and you have people appointing people that they feel they can control and so on. So we try to, you know, what we say is that there has to be a degree of political involvement in the appointment of the DG and the deputy DGs, but no lower than that. And that appointment process has to be strongly regulated. And then there's a set of other proposals around professionalizing the public service, around graduate recruitment strategies, and trying to really change the way the public service operates through those kinds of measures. Now, so I think the proposals are there, and they're really important. But of course, whether they are implemented is going to be the outcome of precisely a series of political battles. Because the question is whether there's the political will to actually insulate the administration from political involvement, because that, of course, is where a whole lot of advantages accrue to different factions and different political leaderships. So I think we point towards that. I would say, and from my own experience of trying to engage certain change processes in the state, that this again is a long-term process. It's not something that is going to be achieved within a year or two. It's a long-term struggle to try and establish a highly skilled and highly capable state apparatus, which is very different from what we've got at the moment. And I think that, you know, many different organizations have a lot to contribute to that, including particularly labor and public service unions. Tony, to the comment.
Comrade,
My name is Tony.
can you stand up, please? Talk louder.
I think the plan, is it not weakening the state as a driving force of addressing the imbalances of the past? Especially when it fails to do a lot of industrialization. Because now it creates informal works, you know, and informal jobs. And in the process of creating informal jobs, it means the ability to get or to collect tax becomes difficult. and also the ability to protect the exploitation of the workers becomes difficult because of the informal jobs. It's not easy to organize within those structures. So how, if the state is weakened to address the imbalances of the past, is it going to finance infrastructure? Is it going to finance some of the issues, your inequality, address issues like inequality, if it's unable to be effective in issues like collecting tax?
Okay, well, it's very hard to know how to engage with Karl on this because Karl is here as both intellectual and commissioner. Harder for me because he's also my boss. What I wanted to pick up on was really from Jane and Mike's response to that, and the whole question of where the plan sits and appropriation of it. And Mike has argued, partly in response to Jane, that look, yes, it's absolutely true that big business has appropriated very large swathes of the plan, but nevertheless there are a number of entry points for the left as well. And actually it's the left's fault that they're not, he didn't use the term fault, but rather there's an opportunity for the left to step up and to get engaged as well. So that's a question for those of us on the left, whether we do. I have to say I find it rather hard to do that when the minister in charge of the plan is Trevor Manuel. You know, the problem here is the guy at the top is probably not going to be seen by most of us as an honest broker. In fact, probably the guy at the top is going to be seen as somebody who's contributed probably more than any other individual to the intensification of South Africa's absolutely massive social crisis. The person who loosened the capital controls, the capital be exploited. The person who let the multinational companies delist overseas. The person who removed the tariffs which absolutely destroyed overnight the textile industry. One could go on. The darling of the international markets. The darling of the World Bank, the darling of the International Monetary Fund. It's very, very hard to see that there is an honest broker steering the ship. And if you don't trust the captain, do you want to get on the ship? That's the question really I want to put to Karl. I'm with some of the crewmen or crewwomen who are on the ship, but I don't trust the captain and I'm not sure I want to get on it.
Did you have your hand up? Sorry?
No, I was going to ask about skills development,
So
but
you
my
covered
colleague
already.
already answered it.
Well, I have, just to make myself understood there, I have basically the three questions. One is maybe very simple. How does it come that this notion that you stress very much that this is not a full blueprint, but an open document to get engaged, this is not common knowledge in the public. It hasn't been spread since Mangarung. It was somehow the basis of future policies for the government. So how does it come that this doesn't get into the public and the wider public? Then, I mean, you said, I have, the second thing is this notion of decent work, decent life. In my understanding, I mean, we used to talk about entitlement, human rights, economic human rights, social human rights, rights to work and stuff. In my understanding, I mean, talking about decent work is already a bit watering it down. Everyone can develop his or her own understanding of what decent is. And when we talk now about decent life, I mean, we open it up for, isn't it watering it down, making it less, able to become a tool for workers' movement and the poor. And then about your vision, I think it's a very, it goes a bit deep now. Your vision about employment guarantees through community work. I understand your approach that this is self-defined, that community defines, but don't you see this risk of having a second market? You say it's beyond the economy, but but still, I mean, this is something government also according to the constitution. I mean, they have the government has to take care of the poor, rather than having a brigade of working poor who are doing meaningful work, but without being paid and without getting through that access to the main labor market. I mean, we have this big problem in Germany. We are also developing these many working poor for €1 jobs, we call them, and we find out that they were first implemented to prevent people from dequalifying through long-term unemployment, but they get stuck there. And is this vision of having people working in their communities, which I'm very sympathizing with, but couldn't it become a trap for those who are in it, maybe?
Thanks very much. Other questions or comments? Please.
Thanks, my name is Kubin Pellet. I'm management consultant and a researcher at the Public Development Unit of Tufts University. What's important is that I think there was some presentation made by Mark Haywood some time ago. We spoke about the Constitution being a compromise in 1994, but also being a living document and an evolving document. And Prof said earlier, NDP is very much similar. It's an evolving document. It's one for dialogue. The NDP sets a long-term vision for 20 years, 20 to 30 years. I think my concern, and probably a question to Prof, is whatever we do in the short term should be talking to the long term. And the question is, if you look at the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, everything that's on a daily basis that's reported in the media doesn't talk to the sustainability of what we're doing, doesn't talk to the medium to long term objectives of the NDP. For example, how does Nkandla talk to the NDP? How does Marikana talk to the NDP? How does the Limpopo textbook set? All these are actually in conflict to the long-term vision that we want to achieve. And I think the earlier speaker mentioned this point about the captain. And I think you, in a way, while you're right, the point made by the earlier speaker about what's happening in Europe, we have to take some accountability as civil society, as academia. In a couple of years' time, when the whole ship collapses, we can't say we told you so. So at the PND, and what we're trying to do in collaboration with some of the other entities like SWOP, as well as the broader civil society movement, is unraveling the NDP next year, maybe a chapter each month, and you will get to know that in due course, and basically taking it apart and looking at the challenges of implementation. We've had many programs in the last 20 years. We don't want this to be another program for the next administration to come. And then we have a new NDP for 2050. So the question is, I think while the comments and challenges are correct, we need to take some ownership, we need to tear it apart, and let's try and see if we can make it work. And this thing about the political will, while it's right, we as civil society again will have to take some role here. We need to influence the political will. We've seen failed states, Zimbabwe, Egypt, Syria, unfolding in front of us, and the gentleman spoke about Europe earlier. So we need to know how to influence it by evidence-based policy, by results, by what's happening on the ground. So Prof, while it's a concern and a challenge, maybe from a question point of view, you can share with us what we're doing in the short term, how is it influencing the medium to long-term objectives of the NDP?
Thank you. Last question, right at the back. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Eddie Jensen from Theory. Karl, you used the word business day, business people are appropriating. Aren't you doing exactly the same thing? You know, you appropriate for this audience as, you know, there's a bit here about possibilities of decent life and so on and so forth. So you craft, you cherry pick out of the document things that sound touchy-feely and can be presented as something that opens its mouth. I don't blame you in a way, because for me, this is in the nature of what the NDP is. Its whole idea of being a 20-year, 30-year time scale, the fact that it's chaired by members of the cabinet, but it's not of government. It's not the official policy that allows movements out there, therefore, to hold government responsible for implementing this. Now that's precisely the nature of its politics. It emerges in a period when the ANC is in a moral crisis, corruption, the ongoing service delivery revolts, etc. So, you know, there were a number of calls, Bobby Godselves and others before that, to have some kind of new economic Odessa. So this is of that sort of spirit. Let's get together a wide range of people, invite people from various perspectives, put them in a room, and they can talk and craft whatever they're going to craft. 20 years is something, we'll all be dead in 20 years' time. So nobody has to be held responsible. It's a perfect thing. I mean, it's a master plan. And therefore, you can have Karl presenting it here and say to some next left knees here, oh, there's progressive stuff. And everybody goes on and feels happy. Bobby Godself can give a report to the Business Council and everybody cheers and is happy. That's in the nature of the beast. Now, it's a serious challenge to COSATU, because COSATU's had a 20-year history of these programs